The sun was just beginning to rise over the training range, throwing long shadows across the gravel and steel silhouettes that stood waiting downrange. The air was cool, still carrying a trace of morning mist, and the veteran SEAL adjusted his ball cap as he leaned against the barrier, coffee in hand. It was supposed to be a routine day, another quiet morning spent running drills with men who had proven themselves a dozen times over in combat. That was why he noticed her instantly. She didn't belong here, at least not in the way he was used to seeing shooters come in, rough around the edges, scarred, or carrying that subtle heaviness of experience. She walked in calm, measured, and strangely confident, with an M24 rifle balanced in her hands like it was no heavier than a broomstick. He frowned at the sight. The rifle itself was no toy. It was a precision instrument, one he had carried on missions where a single mistake meant not coming home. He knew its weight. The way the bolt sometimes fought you, if you didn't handle it with authority, the way its scope demanded a shooter's patience and discipline. It was never meant for beginners, never meant for someone who looked like they hadn't even seen combat boots muddy from the field. His gut reaction was immediate, the kind that came from too many years of sizing people up. She was out of place, and whoever had put that weapon in her hands was making a mistake. The range around them was quiet except for the crunch of her boots on gravel as she moved to the firing line. The others didn't say much. A few raised their brows, some smirked, waiting for what they assumed would be an awkward show of fumbling with equipment far beyond her reach. The SEAL took a slow sip of his coffee, muttering to no one in particular. Who gave her that rifle? His tone was half amusement, half warning, as if someone needed to claim responsibility before she hurt herself. Yet, as she stepped into position, her posture was deliberate. She wasn't carrying the rifle like it was alien. She wasn't overwhelmed by its length or the authority it projected. There was something subtle in the way she shifted her grip, something practiced in the way she let the stock rest against her shoulder. The SEAL narrowed his eyes, lowering his cup. He had seen that kind of body language before, just not from someone he had already written off. The SEAL set his cup down on the rail, his attention sharpening. He had spent years training rookies, recruits, and even the occasional overconfident officer who thought they could master weapons with nothing but theory. Almost every one of them had made the same mistakes. Too stiff in the shoulders, too quick with their breathing, too careless with the mechanics. He was already imagining how this would play out. She'd shoulder the rifle wrong, scope, bite herself with the recoil, then look embarrassed when the shot went wide. He would step in, take the rifle from her, and tell her to start with something lighter, maybe an M4 carbine at 25 yards. That was the natural order of things, and in his mind, it was only seconds away from happening. But as he studied her more closely, his doubt began to tangle with a strange curiosity. She wasn't fumbling. Her hands moved with certainty, each motion deliberate and quiet. When she set the rifle on the bench, it wasn't dropped or plopped down like dead weight. It was placed respectfully, like someone who understood exactly what they were holding. He caught the faintest flicker of something in her expression, too. Not nerves, not arrogance, focus. That gnawed at him. People didn't fake that kind of calm. Still, he couldn't help himself. Who gave her that rifle? He muttered again, a little louder this time, hoping one of the instructors nearby would shrug or crack a grin and admit the joke. No one answered. A couple of the younger guys snickered under their breath, folding their arms as though waiting for the show. One of them leaned to the other and whispered something that ended in muffled laughter. The SEAL didn't laugh. He'd seen rifles like this humble grown men, soldiers with more muscle and bravado than sense. Watching her handle it so carefully made him uncomfortable. because it didn't line up with his expectation of how this morning should go. His eyes dropped to the rifle again. The M24 was a sniper's tool, built for accuracy at distances where the target seemed like nothing more than a dot on the horizon. It was not a beginner's weapon. The adjustments alone, the parallax, the scope rings, the windage knobs, took months of learning and hundreds of rounds to master. And yet, there she was, standing calm and unreadable, like she had done this before. For the first time that morning, the CL's certainty wavered. Doubt gave way to a faint, reluctant respect that he tried hard not to show. She lowered herself to one knee beside the bench, the M24 balanced across her arms with the kind of control that spoke louder than words. The veteran SEAL watched, still half expecting the slip up that would prove his instincts right, but it never came. Instead of fumbling, she began a slow, methodical inspection. The bolt was pulled back with a clean motion, her eyes flicking to the chamber to confirm it was clear. She didn't rush it, didn't treat it like some casual step to skip over. She looked into the rifle as if it were alive, and she owed it respect. The steel, gray scope caught a glint of morning light as she reached for it. Her fingers moved confidently over the adjustment turrets, spinning them not in idle play, but with a purpose. She counted the clicks under her breath, pausing now and then to glance toward the target's downrange. It was subtle, but the SEAL picked up on it. She wasn't guessing. She was dialing corrections for the distance, maybe even factoring the wind that nudged the flags hanging limp along the firing lane. His frown deepened. Most rookies didn't even know what those knobs did, let alone how to use them. He shifted his stance, arms uncrossing without realizing. Every small adjustment she made rang of someone who had been here before, or at least someone who had studied the craft with unusual discipline. She lifted the rifle, resting the stock against her shoulder, and adjusted the cheek weld with a practiced nudge. Her eye aligned with the optic in one fluid motion, no squinting, no awkward hunting for the sight picture, just a smooth connection between shooter and scope. The CL's coffee sat cooling behind him, forgotten. He found himself studying the smallest details now, the way her elbows set into the bench, creating a stable triangle. The controlled breath she released as she settled her body. This wasn't luck. This was training. But where had she gotten it? Not the casual kind passed down in hunting trips, not the sloppy trial and error of backyard plinking. This was sharper, almost professional. He rubbed at his jaw, feeling a quiet unease creep in. For years, he'd been the one to surprise others, the one who stunned crowds with precision and calm under pressure. Watching her work through the rifle's mechanics with such composure left him unsettled. The thought pressed into him harder with every movement she made. Maybe this wasn't going to be the lesson he thought it would. Maybe it was his turn to learn something. She slid the rifle fully into position, lying prone now, her body stretched across the mat with every limb locked into a deliberate posture. The veteran SEAL had seen countless shooters rush this moment, shouldering too high, tensing their grip, or forgetting that accuracy began not with the rifle, but with the shooter's own stillness. Yet she looked as though she had rehearsed this routine hundreds of times. Her left hand cradled the stock just forward of the magazine well, fingers steady but relaxed. Her right hand wrapped around the grip, fingers straight and safe, hovering just outside the trigger guard. Even her legs were perfectly placed, toes dug lightly into the ground for balance, knees spread just enough to create a rock-solid base. The M24 settled into her shoulder as though it belonged there. She let out a slow breath, then another, and finally sank into a rhythm. The steel targets gleamed faintly in the distance, hundreds of yards away, smaller than her palm at that range. For most people, the idea of hitting one cleanly was daunting enough. For her, it seemed like nothing more than the next logical step in a process she already owned. The seal leaned forward slightly, his lips pressed into a thin line. He expected hesitation, maybe nerves to creep in now that the shot mattered. Instead, she tilted her head a fraction, adjusted the parallax knob on the scope, and whispered something under her breath. A quick calculation, maybe a reminder to herself about wind drift or elevation. Then she stilled completely. It was as if the air around her froze with her focus. When the shot came, it was clean. No flinch, no jerk, no wasted movement. The rifle barked, the recoil absorbed seamlessly into her frame. Downrange, the steel plate answered with a sharp metallic ping, echoing across the range. Dead center. A perfect strike. She barely blinked. Her right hand immediately lifted the bolt, drawing it back in one smooth motion, ejecting the brass with a faint clink. The next round was chambered before the seal had even processed what he'd seen. The other spectators had gone silent. The smirks that had been exchanged earlier were gone, replaced with wide eyes and uncertain glances. She was already setting up her next shot, breathing steady, scope aligned, as if the first hit had meant nothing. To her, this wasn't luck. It was routine. The CL's chest tightened with a mix of surprise and something harder to admit, respect. He had underestimated her, and in his world, that was an error you didn't make twice. The sharp ring of the steel plate still echoed in the CL's ears as he lowered his sunglasses, staring at the woman through a narrowed gaze. He had watched countless shooters take their first shots, and nearly all of them gave themselves away, an adrenaline spike, a nervous grin, or a muttered curse when the round went wide. But she gave nothing. No smile, no triumphant glance in his direction. She simply cycled the bolt with the fluidity of someone who had been doing it for years, sliding another round into the chamber without hesitation. It was muscle memory, and that realization unsettled him more than the perfect shot itself. Around them, the spectators remained frozen in silence. A few had leaned forward, mouths slightly open, waiting for her to stumble on the second shot. Nobody spoke, not even the instructors, who usually filled the air with banter. The only sounds were the steady hum of the morning breeze and the quiet clicks of her hands adjusting the rifle once more. The SEAL had to admit it. She wasn't just lucky, and this wasn't a fluke. She was operating in a space only professionals lived in. He crossed his arms again, trying to mask the flicker of respect rising inside him. Years of habit told him to stay skeptical. Anyone could land one good hit. But then came the second crack, quick and controlled, followed by another perfect ping downrange. She didn't pause to celebrate. She didn't even glance at the steel to confirm what she already knew. She just rolled the bolt, chambered the next round, and set up again, her breathing as calm as if she were lying on a couch instead of behind one of the most demanding rifles in service. The SEAL swallowed hard. He had trained men who buckled under pressure, soldiers who cracked when precision demanded patience. But here was this woman, unknown and underestimated, performing with the kind of focus that even hardened operators struggled to maintain. He realized he wasn't watching a beginner. He was watching someone reveal a truth she'd carried quietly all along, that she knew exactly what she was doing. Damn. He muttered under his breath, the words slipping out before he could stop it. His voice carried just enough to turn a few heads, but she didn't flinch. She didn't acknowledge him at all. The rifle cracked again, another hit ringing out. She was too locked into her own rhythm, too immersed in the precision of the moment, to care about his disbelief. And for the first time in years, the SEAL felt something rare, the sting of being humbled.